Hello everyone, I am Vaishnavi J. Desai, Assistant Editor, ATCIO. Welcome to this webinar by ATCIO and Thoughtworks, Crafting Your Digital Advantage with the Power of Platforms. Over the course of the discussion, we will help you uncover the essence of digital transformation and its impact on businesses, exploring the 4 pivotal types of digital platforms driving innovation and reshaping industries. For this session, I am joined by esteemed speakers, Suneet Parekh, who's the Head of Digital Platforms Practice India for Thoughtworks, and GT, who's the Principal Consultant India, Thoughtworks. Welcome, Suneet and GT. In an era where digital platforms underpin the most revolutionary business success, understanding and leveraging these powerful tools has never been more critical. Through real-world use cases and strategies, we will decode the complexities of digital platforms and delve deep into business capability platforms, engineering platforms, data platforms, and customer experience platforms. Each pillar now represents a key facet in the digital transformation journey, offering unique opportunities for growth, innovation, and engagement. We will also touch upon gaining cutting-edge insights, learning from industry leaders, and seeing beyond the buzzwords. Before I invite GT to begin with this session, there will be a poll question coming up. Pratham, may I request you to put this poll question up for the audiences, please? So here's the first poll question. Are you already in your journey of implementing digital platforms? 3 options are yes, already in, yes, going to kickstart soon, and no plans as of now. I repeat, the poll question will be there for some time for you to note. Are you already in your journey of implementing digital platforms? We would like to gain your insights on where you are on the digital maturity curve so we can help you better. We'll go in once more for the poll question. Are you already in your journey of implementing digital platforms? Your options are yes, you're already in, going to kickstart soon, or no plans as of now. I hope you've all made note of it. Thank you, Pratham. I would also request the audience to leave your questions in the chat box and we will address them to the best of our abilities at the end of the session. Now I welcome GT to take the floor and we would like to listen to your insights on this. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time. I'm unable to see all of you, but I do want to welcome you once again to this particular webinar. Probably a very tough hour, many of us would have actually had our lunch maybe an hour or two ago. Food coma was going to be, setting in. So I'm going to be fighting against that nature, but I'm going to do my best. I'll try to ensure that, we keep you awake. Yeah. All right. With that, let's get into the digital platforms, the power of digital platforms. But a little bit of context before we talk about the digital platforms themselves. Let's talk a little bit about the digital transformation. We kind of use this slide within Thoughtworks to talk about the journey that at a very high level, macro level, how tech, the role of tech has actually been changing with respect to the businesses themselves. Even if you go, just look at the India story, look at it from a, 20, 25 years time perspective, right? We actually see a huge change, right? I remember the days, trying to, go somewhere, train being one of my favorite modes of transportation. We had to really go to the railway station, stand in a queue, get there early in the morning so that we can get ahead of the queue, book a ticket. And then on the day of the journey, I had to run around to some place close by so that I could, get a hold of a Kali Pili taxi or some kind of an auto or some local transportation and then, go on those train journeys, right? Or making any kind of payments or anything, be it your electricity bill or any kind of home related stuff payments, right? Used to be like a chore, so to speak, right? At a minimum, right? But now look at where we have actually reached, right? Tech has moved significantly from those days where it was probably not visible, so to speak, and also probably was kind of playing some kind of a supporting role to nowadays where we actually can do all of these things within the palm of our hands, right? Nowadays, you think of a problem, there probably are 20 different applications that are available, that could be available on your mobile for you to do that, right? So that's been the tremendous change that we have actually seen. It definitely pervades everything. Tech definitely pervades businesses and definitely had that kind of impact if I were to look ourselves as end customers of using that particular technology. And we're also at an age where a huge country like India and somebody like Nandan Nilankani talks about digital public infrastructure, and talks about solutions that are, and the scale of that is actually mind-boggling. The term he uses is actually population scale, right? We have so many such good examples, right? And we talk about that. And of course, I've been giving examples from a personal perspective just to talk about how tech has actually pervaded every aspect of life. It's so is also the case with businesses. Businesses also try to figure out how they can actually make use of this technology that's now actually available to actually figure out how they can actually better implement their strategies and how to gain more market share, or how to do things better, or how to become more effective, right? That aspect, very loosely termed, is what we are, at a high level, is what we're calling it as digital transformation. And we probably need a working definition. So this is the definition that I'm going to go with. So digital transformation is about integrating technologies into the products of an organization to enhance its own employees and also its end customers, improve competitiveness and bring about efficiency, right? At the end of the day, it's about that ROI, right? So that's a working definition that I'm actually going to go with. And you had the poll question that came up as well, and that's basically what we were trying to do. Most companies are either in the midst of a digital transformation journey, or are they actually planning on one? So that's basically what we were actually trying to gauge, right? Now, having said that, there seems to be a little hit couple of bumps along the road, right? We may not be, yes, it's a little bit dated. The data is about 5 or 6 years old, but the overall sentiment seems to be true, right? Maybe we're not really getting the full-fledged, or the amount of ROIs and the way we thought it's going to, pan out may not be actually happening, right? Obviously, depends, on where we are in that particular journey, where that particular enterprise in that particular journey, and so on and so forth. And we may not be able to talk about all the various aspects. But what I'd like to do is talk about two key challenges that we've actually seen up front. I'm going to talk about them next. And then maybe towards the end of it, I'll probably mention one more potential challenge as to why we might have actually hit these road bumps. Yeah, so that's the way we're going to take this forward. So to talk about the first challenge itself, this is about the mindset, right? About how we approach such digital transformations and what the approach that we take towards solving a very complex problem, right? Before I get into it, I think it's fair to establish and basically state that these are actually not simple problems. They are not run-of-the-mill kind of problems that you can just solve this thing. There is inherent complexities involved. And if I were to look at from a BFSI or a banking space, which are extremely large, enterprises, having multiple different kinds of offerings, be it lending, investments, insurance, so on and so forth, whatever may be your divisions or business units, and offering at times hundreds of different products, right? So that's not an easy thing to do. So there is inherent complexity in the domain itself. And one of the things that we as humans have actually figured out how to deal with such complex systems is by actually organizing ourselves in some kind of hierarchies, right? It's a very natural way of how we organize ourselves to deal with that kind of complexity, right? So I'm not taking that away, and I'm not trying to belittle that. Yes, that particular complexity exists. On top of that, let's look at an example in terms of, again, a lending division, right? Where I might be trying to sell maybe an auto loan or a credit card or whatever to my customers, right? And talking a little bit specific about the banking industry, we know we actually have a lot of different channels, so to speak, right? Branch, mobile, web apps, call center, brokers. We have lots of different channels and different kinds of users who use these different channels. And also, COTS is actually a very, it's very prevalent, right? Given all these stuff, if I were to take about how do I go about selling, if I were to say I'm trying to sell some auto loan, I could actually, if I were to go with the systems approach thing, I would probably say, okay, given this particular channel and given this particular product I'm trying to build, I probably am going to build a system that actually meets my requirement, right? It'll probably work, right? But it's pretty, small in terms of what it's actually trying to solve for, in terms of the vision it tries to solve for, but it actually does it. But the problem comes when we try to launch something similar product, same product on a different channel, or something that's related product as well, right? On all these various channels, right? So you'll then say, okay, because I'm trying to do this for a bank branches, I'm probably going to go with Fin1. Whereas the call center folks are probably trying to build their journeys, the product journey and the user journey on top of something like Salesforce or something similar, right? Again, what actually ends up happening, the same kind of functionality is now actually replicated, repeated, not just in one systems, but also in the other, right? And this is actually a compounding kind of an effect. The more the channels and the more different channels and the different apps that we try to solve for, and if I try to solve it in a very limited fashion of trying to address that small niche kind of a product perspective or this, I probably will end up with situations which which lead to such kind of issues. So what are the issues that we actually deal with? Duplicated effort. We actually see this building silos on top of making it into silos, right? Making it extremely difficult to either develop and or to maintain those particular features and functionalities, right? Does not matter whether we have purchased the product, it's a cost product or a in-house developed product. Somebody has to still maintain it, right? So that actually adds up pretty quickly, right? Which in turn means it's extremely time consuming, least efficient and expensive, and hence our ROIs could potentially take a hit. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is also we are now probably having replicated data. I as a customer, if I use a mobile app to go and apply for a credit card, and then it doesn't tell me anything about what the status is or what happened, and I actually happen to call or go to a bank branch, and if they don't have that particular information and say, no, call the call center and they will tell you that, that's not a very good customer experience perspective. So it's the silos of not just the functionality, but also siloed from a user journey perspective also is not a very great thing to have for, right? And definitely for the teams that are actually maintaining it, need not just be the tech teams, but even the product folks and the folks who are within the bank who look after these systems and try to maintain them, it definitely increases their cognitive load, right? So 2 points I'm trying to make here. One, the hierarchical approach itself has inherent complexities associated with it. And if I were to add this kind of duplicated effort in terms of data and also systems, it probably, it's like a double whammy, right? Double the trouble, right? So instead of this, is there a better approach? Yes, we think there is a better approach. And that's basically the platform approach that we're actually going to talk about. And this is what we are actually going to focus on in the coming slides, right? So I said I'm going to talk about two problems that we typically see in most of this. This is one of them. It's the mindset approach in terms of system approach versus a platform approach. And the second one that I've actually seen is with respect to overloaded and context sensitive. What do we mean by this? And I'm actually specifically talking about the word platform itself. This is a problem we actually have in our industry. When I say our industry, the computer the services industry, we tend to overuse that particular term, and we use them slightly differently. We'll add a word to it, remove a word to it, and we actually mean a completely different thing, right? Yes, it's not far-fetched from how a language gets used in a regular context as well. In fact, if you just look at the word platform, and only one among the fourth one or the fifth one is talking about computing, the rest are all generic stuff. And that's how languages are, right? And if you were outside of this whole context, if you were to ask me about platform, probably the railway station platform is the first thing that probably would come to my mind, right? So the point I'm trying to make is context then becomes important, right? And the more it becomes context sensitive like this, the more it hinders the communication, right? So a complicated topic like digital platforms, I think needs two things, right? One, a well thought out, thought framework or a mental map of some kind. It's that particular framework, and it actually needs to go with a set of well-defined, unambiguous set of words and terms that actually help us communicate exactly what we mean, right? And this is another problem that we have actually seen happening with respect to platform. So the talk today, hopefully, we don't have too much of time, and it's a pretty vast topic. But in the time that we actually have, we would like to demystify the word platform, digital platforms, what the various types are, what we mean by it, what is Thoughtworks' definition of it, and how we approach to solving for it is, what I'm actually going to be talking about. Yeah. So with that said, let me jump right in and say the first statement that we actually going to make with respect to digital platforms and the way we connect it to the digital transformation journeys that we are on is by stating this fact that digital platforms enable or drives digital transformations. Hopefully, by the end of this particular presentation, I will show you how it actually connects. So I'm going to talk about this at the very end. I'll leave that for now. This is the same statement that I put in the very first slide, so I'm not going to go over it. That's my working definition of a digital transformation. And having said that, I'm now going to talk about Thoughtworks' definition of what digital platforms are. Digital platforms are technology foundations that accelerate an enterprise ability to deliver value. And there you can see we are actually calling out not only for its people, but also its end customers. The point we're trying to make is it's not with respect to just an end customer, but it also provides inherent efficiency for the folks who are actually working on it. So that's basically what we're referring to as people. Yeah. So if that's the definition, the next logical question would be, then what is a digital platform made up of then, right? Here we have a very high level, 2 words saying technology foundation. What do we actually mean by that, right? So that's where we add the next word and we say digital platforms are actually built on top of capabilities, or capability-based model is how you actually build a digital platform. That's another way of saying it. So obviously the next question is, okay, you have introduced one more term. What do I now mean by capability, right? So that's the next logical question. So for us, what we say is a capability is this. Capability is something that describes what a business does, right? It is agnostic of technology. It's also called as an org function, by the way. It is not about any technology. It's not about a particular new thing of how to build it. It has nothing to do with that. There are different choices. There are implementation strategies that you get to make a choice later. But at a capability level, we are basically saying it is something that describes what a org does, right? It's neither about where it is done. We don't try to distinguish between it is this department, this team versus that team or whatever. At an enterprise level, we are actually trying to look at that particular capability and say, do you have that capability or not? That's the question that we're actually trying to ask. And again, nor are we asking why it has to be done. I mean, in a couple of slides, we'll talk about why this particular capability model. We'll answer that a little bit. But to start with, from a definitions perspective, it is something that identifies what a business does, an org function, right? And one of the, based on our experience, one of the best ways to actually think about capabilities is to actually think about Lego blocks, right? I know I've put quite a few there, right? But you can actually see there are, I don't know, 5 or 6 different individual ones. They're obviously of different shapes and sizes, right? Probably like me, maybe, this was one of my favorite toys that I had, and I don't know how many countless hours that I've spent during my childhood. But it makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of parallels that we could actually draw by looking at capability as a Lego block, right? Please note, I'm saying one capability is one type of a Lego block, as in it has a particular shape and a size, and it has actually a particular function, right? How and how do we make use of it? We're going to come to it in a couple of slides. Yeah. Now, just a couple of examples, obviously, just to get us started to think in terms of capabilities, right? Might be a little hard initially because our minds are still not used to thinking that way. Maybe we are still thinking in terms of a system or a function, but taking it just to look at it from a capability takes a while. Here are a couple of examples, right? Again, going back to the lending division, if I were to build any kind of products for that particular division, one of the steps, I'm not saying this is everything, but one of the key important steps somewhere during that life cycle of me selling, as a bank selling that particular product to its end customer, they would actually have to do risk assessment, right? Please note, we are not saying how it is implemented. We are not saying who's doing it. We are not saying where it is done. We're just calling out risk assessment as a functionality, something that the bank or this lending division should have a capability to address, right? So does KYC, right? We have to figure out how to do KYC of the various customers that we are actually going to bring on board and do the servicing, right? Now, I've color coded them in a particular way. I'll get to that in a second. Now, these are what we call as business capabilities, right? Capabilities that are related to the business aspect of it. Now, The next one, I've obviously changed the color because they obviously come from a different dimension. The dimension that we talk about here is more from an engineering perspective. Again, irrespective of what technology stacks or what frameworks that I'm going to use, we have to figure out how our developers and all the other capability, UI, UX, all of them coming together. How are they going to write their code? How are they going to, once done, what is the path that they're actually going to take? How are you going to go release it? Whether it's a new feature or a bug fix, how are they going to go release that, right? Our continuous integration and continuous delivery, the pipelines that we talk about. We call it as path production, right? That's the capability that we need to build. And similarly, observability, right? We have to know whether our services are up or his product is selling. If somebody had a failure, we need to know why it failed, where it failed. Obviously, we need to know all of that. And that is basically the capability of observability, right? So just to summarize, the key here is to understand that digital platforms are built on top of capabilities. Capabilities simply define what without being with being agnostic to any kind of technology, and they have this unique feature of that you can actually look up them as one single Lego block. Yeah. Now, you already have a hint here. That means there must be different types of capabilities, right? In fact, we do have 4 different types of capability, right? So what are the 4 types? They are customer experience type capabilities. They are business capabilities. They are engineering capabilities and data capabilities, right? I probably did a switcheroo on you. I know I've been talking about capabilities and I suddenly mentioned the word platform. Yeah. So what I've been trying to say is this, right? You group these multiple capabilities of the same type of dimension or the same type, and that itself becomes a platform, right? So when you put together all your customer experiences capabilities, we call that as actually a platform. Same thing with the business and the engineering and the data capabilities. And that's why the word we used was digital platforms was a pluralistic way of saying it can actually be made up of these types of 4 platforms themselves, right? That's what we actually wanted to say. Let's go one level deep, right? It doesn't say too much of how it is made up of this. So let's go look at this. Here is a sample kind of a example of the various types of your platforms. And in the business capability platform and the engineering platform, I mean, these parts, I'm definitely showing you the capabilities that it's made up of. Here in the customer experience platform, I've not gone down to the level of a capability yet. Probably we'll do that later, but here it's just trying to show who the various types of customers are and what is the applications that they typically tend to use, right? But here you can definitely see, right? So again, going back to the lending platform, irrespective of whether I'm trying to sell auto loan, credit loan, or whatever, I have to figure out how am I going to, what is acquisition going to be like? How are we going to onboard the customers? How are we going to service them? How are we going to do the loan servicing? What is the personal servicing that we need to do, right? Now, just that, what I just explained, should give you a hint about how this is completely opposite, tangentially opposite to a system-based view. Here, we are actually not talking about a system at all. We are talking about capabilities as these building blocks, without talking about how I'm going to go use that in which particular product, right? Or how I'm going to use it in the different applications. And that is what actually gives us the power. And that's why we say platforms are built actually on top of capabilities. Other point here, the second point, we are actually not trying to say you need to build everything that we actually, that we are actually having here. COTS being very prevalent, as I mentioned earlier, if it gives us a very well defined, has a nice boundary, and it does solve a particular capability, we should be able to actually make use of it and actually wire it into our this thing. We are not saying no to using any of that, but there should be a way of how we can actually make use of that, right? By the way, this particular example that I'm showing is just a small part, as I mentioned earlier. Once we do it on real projects, it probably would look like this. When you put the bunch of capabilities together on a single visual diagram, we call it as a capability map. It would probably look something like this, taken from a real project. Obviously, I've obfuscated it a little bit. But the reason to use that, to use this capability map, and why we think that's one of the keys to start your journey of your digital platforms, is because it also helps you validate your MISI principle, right? Mutually exclusive and cumulatively exhaustive. What do we mean by that? If you look at your entire capability map, it should be able to tell you whether you have all the capabilities that you need to meet your business objectives that you actually have. It'll help you identify what are the lacuna in terms of business capability that you might actually have. And the other very important part, by having that single diagram, you should be able to actually figure out that you don't actually have duplicates, right? That's the MISI principle. Now, if you think back about the system-oriented approach that I talked about earlier, those are the two problems. Because of the silos in the hierarchy, we ended up having a lot of these particular things duplicated. And by doing a capability-based model, it actually helps us avoid those particular things. Yeah. So that's one of the main reasons as to why we believe capability-based models is a right way to approach. I've talked about this. There's another reason as well, right? So let's assume, obviously, this is not going to happen to you on day one, but if you've been on a platform journey and you've really been thinking about building functionality based on capabilities and not a system-based view, after a particular point in time, you'll actually have this whole set of catalog of capabilities that are now available to you, right? Assume that you have implemented, let's say, auto loan in your lending division, right? Now, if this is the current case, and I now want to launch a new product, let's say I'm trying to, build out something for credit card or personal loans, right? I can go look at it and say, you know what? There's about 50 to 60% of my capabilities are already available. So I just need to plan for the delta of the capabilities that are actually not there. And of course, I have to figure out how to write it in the right way so that I can contribute it back to this particular capability catalog. And based on that, I would actually come up with my planning, sprint plans and all of that, right? But imagine, given that you had already implemented auto loans, how long do you think you should take if you were to say do two-wheeler loans, right? There's a whole lot of overlaps between that, right? It really should be pretty much faster as to how we can actually launch this, right? Now, this I think is another really key distinction and the real reason as to why we say digital platforms should be built on top of capabilities, because this is what enables us to bring in business agility, because this is the one that actually enables us to deliver faster, right? Now, what is it that about this capability that makes this possible? It's because this inherent characteristics. Please note, I'm not trying to say it's very, very easy that you'll be able to do this on day one. It takes a little bit of effort, but once you start thinking in that particular way and you do it, the capabilities themselves have this. And remember, that's the reason, remember the Lego example that I gave you, it's because of this. What happens to the Lego block, right? It can be that individual part, but the real power of that is, it now depends on how I string them together and whatever kind of buildings or infrastructure that I actually want to build with, right? So they are composable, they can be stitched together, and they really give you that particular reusability out of the box. But if they are not 100% reusable, by making it configurable, I might be able to change it, rewire it slightly differently so that I improve the reusability of it, right? So this is, as they call, the money shot, or this is the main slide and the previous one, which says why are we so gung-ho about capabilities or capability-based platforms? This is the reason, right? So I know I probably have taken up 30 minutes. I'll try to take 5 more minutes and talk about, I probably have 5 more slides, one minute each for the next slides. Wanted to talk about the 4 platforms as well. Just peel the first layer of the onion. We have so much of content, it probably takes a long time, but let me do that first layer. When we're trying to build customer experience platform, what we've actually seen is we typically end up going towards just building that particular one as per the requirement, right? We are saying it probably makes a lot of sense to take a little bit of time to think about it as a platform, create that first, along with creating this, right? And in order to do this, we also have to do a little bit of a leg up work, trying to think in terms of product journeys across the various channels we're going to have, right? Think about the user journeys and the user customer data, and then go build it, right? So if I'm building something for insurance versus I'm trying to build something for a lending division, right? Based on the baseline product, there's a typical workflow or a journey that the product lifecycle itself has. right? So I should figure that out and I should know what it is, because the details is where the devil lies. And once I break it down, I should be able to map it and say, you know what, even though I'm selling so many different products in the same family, only this small particular portion changes, and that allows me to encapsulate my capabilities the right way and extract them out. So very, very important. And I need to do the same thing with data user journeys as well, because extremely important from a customer journey perspective that we don't ask them the same questions again, ask me never, existing to bank or new to bank. Depending on that, I should be able to do it. I should be able to offer personalization, not even try to create deduplicated entries. But if they happen to come, I should have a way of how to deduplicate them, right? So something to think about. Then create the actual capability platform. Here, I'll not go into the details. What I'm showing at the bottom of the screen is basically the capabilities. The one main one that I'm going to point out here is, among all the existing architectural approaches and all of that that's currently available, we believe micro front ends based architecture is one of the best ways of how you could build such unified product and customer journeys, right? So something to think about. And once you have figured that out, now go ahead and build all the common capabilities that you would have identified. And if we do this and then build that particular app, it should then be adding those deltas that we talked about earlier and stitching it together using this orchestrator that I actually talked about, right? So that's primarily how we see the journeys actually happening. And here are some of the capabilities that we actually see towards this, right? Like, go into the next one, business capability. This just just trying to show the different capabilities. Obviously, it depends on the domain from which they come from. Insurance and lending domains come from finance domain, of course. And the last one has nothing to do with banking. It's actually retail domain. The point I'm just trying to show here is your business capabilities obviously will depend on the domain in which this particular business operates. And you have to look at that and then go figure that out. But another point I would like to make here is, in terms of implementation strategy, again, based on all the various architectural styles and all of that we have, one of the best ways that we have found to implement these such business capability happens to be a microservice along with some kind of a event-driven architecture. I will not go into the details of it, but again, microservices is one such term where, unfortunately, there's no one single definition that it works in all kinds of scenarios. There's a lot of nuances to it. So when such a thing happens, I fall back on the approach Martin Fowler and Chris Lewis took, right? So if you read their mini website, they'll actually give you about 8 or 9 characteristics, and they say, if you think what you have is a microservice, ensure that it follows these characteristics. That's a way for you to check, right? So I'm going to refer you to that and say that's the definition that I'm actually going to go with. But it's one very good thing. Another additional point I would like to make that I'm going to use in the next slide is microservices should be built for tightly, highly cohesive and loosely coupled, right? Functional decomposition will give you highly cohesive stuff, whereas in terms of loose coupling, it could expose an API, or it could also talk asynchronously using some kind of an events, right? And I'm going to use that in the next slide. That's the reason for me to mention it. Let me go to the next one. The 2 platforms I've spoken so far are with respect to building products that are actually used by some customers, internal, external, doesn't matter. But those teams, the product teams themselves, can make use of a lot of help, right? And that is what we call as an engineering platform, right? It itself is a technical platform which using which the product teams will either build business capabilities and or customer experience capabilities, right? And do that particular product. So what are the aspects that we need to cover? First and foremost, self-service, right? I shouldn't be a case where, oh, I need this particular test ephemeral instance for me to go test this. I shouldn't be raising tickets and waiting for a week or 2 for me to get that particular instance, right? That's just probably is not going to work, right? And once I get it, I should also, the underlying infrastructure should ensure for this particular kind of a capability I'm building, it should actually bake in the CI/CD stuff. That's kind of a standard at that particular company or a division level. It should bake that in. Observability, monitoring, security, all those things should get actually baked in, right? Carl Sagan made a very famous statement. He said, if you're going to build an apple pie from scratch, you actually have to go invent the universe first, right? wrong. It's a great statement, probably the wrong place to apply. So we shouldn't be doing Carl Sagan here. A lot of these things are need not be started from scratch. So step one or scratch zero or whatever you want to call it. These things should be baked in, and we need to allow our developers and the teams to do the work that they're actually supposed to do, rather than trying to invent the whole universe, so to speak, right? Remember, I talked about APIs and events. It was for this. Now, it's just not important for us APIs to have it. Now I have to have a way for me to publish that. And if it's already written by someone, I have to way to consume that. And that is what we call as discoverability. And we have to do discoverability with respect to our APIs, events, and also data models, right? And last but not the least, our favorite whipping horse in most of the cases, knowledge hubs, right? They happen to be in so many different locations. They are not accessible. Nobody knows about them, unfortunately. So one of the key capability that we always say is, please figure out how you can put a unified search across all your resources, right? So that's a key capability. By the way, I know this slide is slightly different from the others because each line here is actually a capability that I'm actually talking about. It's just that not listed in the form of a box, right? So that's one of the most important things. We had to figure out how people are going to collaborate, how are we going to do onboarding, offboarding, sensible defaults, all of that. And on top of this, we actually have to now go put a governance model, right? 4 key metrics, SRE stuff, cloud costs, which is actually becoming a big thing. How do we keep an eye out, and how do we track all these expenses that are coming, right? And once you do all of this, how do you make it easy for others to come and use? You could actually then put a developer experience portal on top of it. That's basically how we see this. Do watch out. In the industry, there are terms. One of the terms used is IDP, stands for internal developer, that's for sure. But IDP can actually be portal, can also be platform. So just be watchful of that particular terminology being used. But in terms of Thoughtworks, we are saying engineering platform is this bunch of capabilities. On top of it, you can actually go have a single pane of glass helping you to self-serve. That's how we clarify that. Data platform, this can be a huge platform by itself. I will not go into the details. I'm going to skip it, but I've just, again, given the fundamental capabilities without talking about what technology I could be using to enable this. But these are some of the things that we'll actually have to go solve for, right? Now, if I solve for these 4 types of platforms, am I good, right? And that's a very good essential step, but we do feel that it's actually not fully sufficient, right? So if you were to superimpose the digital platforms that we've been talking about on top of the PPT framework, right, you will see that, yes, these are the capability ones. You will actually see the Lego blocks once again here. Yes, these are the 4 platforms, and we should build it based on capabilities, but just this is not sufficient. So what else are we going to need, right? We are actually going to need, yes, all of this, but the key ones here, right? Org structure and team organizations and operating model are the real keys. Based on personal experience, I can tell you a lot of focus is given on this, rightly so, because that's the main thing we're trying to build. But the same level of focus and this thing sometimes seems to be missing. And that could be one of the reasons why folks are actually having difficulties in terms of their digital transformative journeys as well, right? So digital platforms are based on top of capabilities, but just that capabilities are not enough. It has to be, you have to take care of the other 2 pillars, especially the team structures and the operating model as well. And with that, if you look at what the digital transformation statement says, it's exactly that. And this is the reason why we say digital platforms is what enables or drives our digital transformation. And digital platforms themselves are built on capabilities. And the reason to hype up the capabilities because it allows for you to make them individual, Lego blocks that can be plugged together any which way that you want. And that reusability is how you are actually going to derive or go to markets faster. And that should enable you to get a better ROI. Those are all the slides that I had. There's a bit of reference material. Yes, we will try to answer some of the questions post our Q&A. But in case we are not able to get through, please do write to us, and we'll be more than happy to answer back your questions. With that, thank you so much. Thank you for lending me your ear. Vaishnavi, I hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, JT. Thank you for your insights. And there'll be another poll question coming up. Pratham, can you please put this up, please? Yes. So the other question is, which type of platforms are you looking forward to in the near future? And the options are customer experience platform, business capability platform, engineering platform, and data platform. All four of which GT took time to explain. So which type of platforms are you looking forward to in the near future? The poll will be up for under 10 to 15 seconds. Do have a look, choose wisely. This will be a great insight to both GT and Sunit and Thoughtworks team. All right, one last time, which type of platforms are you looking forward to in the near future? Customer experience, business capability, engineering, and data platform. Thank you, Pratham. Thank you so much. Perfect. I would like to invite Sunit Parekh for a fireside chat now. Sunit, shall we begin?
Yes.
Perfect. So as the journey of building platforms is long, where should one begin and how should we derive early value from it?
Yeah, I think when we start thinking about platforms, it looks like and feels like a long journey which will take multi-year program, and it is going to be a multi-year program. So we have to apply all our product thinking principles here, where we start with looking at MVP for the platform. So we call it as minimal viable platform, and we can start from there. I think identify one product to start with, identify capabilities for that, as JT was talking about, start the journey from there, launch that product. Like look at 5 to 6 months as a maximum time for the first initial launch of the product on the new platform. Earlier the better, but don't take longer than that. And after that, keep evolving it with the engineering practices like evolutionary architecture and all of that. So don't get into the trap of multi-year thing. Start from a use case, and from that business use case, start building the platform and start crafting those capability catalog. Initially, we'll have 2, 3, 5 capabilities, 10, 20 capabilities, and slowly, over a period of time, it'll reach to the stage where we have 50, 100 capabilities. And many times this translates to microservice architecture very well. And this kind of like mapping there. So if you build it in that fashion, by launching and getting the early value by launching the product, one product at a time, that will be the best approach to go towards building platform.
Okay. So now that we assume the platforms are being built, but the issue rises at scalability. So what are the key attributes or principles that can help build platforms, but specifically at scale?
Yes. Now capabilities catalog can be huge, right? So you have 50, 100 capabilities that are required for the organization. So two parts to it. First part, I would say that don't try to build every capability yourself. You can even go ahead and buy some capabilities. Think it like a mobile phone manufacturer, right? What they do is like they build the phone, but processor is from some other company, the screen is from some other company, and they have their USP, which is like putting this together and designing this product. Same way, think at a platform. So if you have certain capabilities that we can directly buy, and there are service providers or the vendors who provide these capabilities as a service, and we integrate with them. There are many use cases like KYC, then payments and all of that. So that's one thing that you can think of, where we can think of buying some capabilities also, but don't buy systems, buy capabilities. That's the one part that I would suggest. Another point that I would say is that build capabilities which is in the heart as API first approach, so that APIs can be exposed to the customer experience platform from business capabilities, and APIs can be exposed to the partner for integration and external third-party integrations as well. So if you go with the API first approach, self-service capabilities for APIs, like from one system to another, there is a lot of communication within the one capability to another when we are building the product. So in that concept, if you have APIs available for anyone to consume internal, as well as if we have a third party to integrate with, that will be the best. Like for example, if we have to use and leverage Google Maps, we directly go to their website, understand what are the APIs available, how to integrate, buy, and start using them. If you have similar ecosystem within the organization, we are not exposing all APIs outside. But if you have that kind of ecosystem within the organization, we can start seeing the very fast time to market for building these products. But if you are people dependent for building anything or integrating, we have to go and chase 10 people to integrate. It's going to take very long. So another principle that I will talk about is self-service. So think platform like product, think like self-service, think of build and buy, evaluate what makes sense for the particular capability. All these are good principles to follow when you are building the platform.
Understood. So what are the trade-offs, Sunit, that come with implementing digital platforms?
Yeah, challenge is that. So when you're starting, you are always in a rush. I need it yesterday, right? And trade-off is when you have to build and starting this journey of platform, you will be having great challenges because business is saying, I want it yesterday. You are giving me not today, tomorrow. You are giving me after 5 days just because you are building platform. But it has a challenge that so that trade-off is kind of a little tricky to handle. So sometimes you have to take a tactical or a strategic. So whether go for a technical, building a capability is a strategic approach. If you build it very specific to only one product, it cannot be leveraged by the other product when you have to build, right? So now the question comes is how you go about implementing that capability, having the configurability as a parameter. Like, yeah, we have to think like we are providing this capability to n number of different consumer within the organization. And everyone is going to come with a different requirement. I need payment service with XYZ options. I need payment service with ABC options. And now our payment service will be able to cater to all of these needs. And that's going to be tricky to build up a day. So the challenge will be like strategic versus quick, dirty kind of approach. So we have to stay away from that. Think strategic. It might take some time initially, but again, remember the product principle of not just taking years to do it. You should be able to do it very quickly. So that's one of the trade-off. Another trade-off will be coming as standardization versus customization, which is again similar, right? Configurability is important to build any type of capability. And if we rush to make it too much configurable, it may take longer. So again, these are interrelated when you think of platforms. So addressing, so I sometimes say is that design for tomorrow, but code for today. Means that you keep the mind that you're going to have these 5 features, but today we just need these 2. Let's just build for that, roll it out. Start getting the value of it from going to production early. And when it comes to evolving it to the next level, you can do it as and when you need it in the future.
Got it. Got it. But there would be some areas of blind spots that the digital leadership needs to watch out for. And they can be very off to grow and to maximize the value of digital platforms. What would those blind sides be and how to navigate those?
Interesting. So this one is tricky. There will be many blind spots because the whole approach of how we have envisioned building softwares and all that is going to change here. And as GT was talking about, platform is one part, but people operating model is the another challenge. So your the way of working is quite different here. So we don't have teams for system. We don't have people, teams which are catering to, okay, you are managing system A, system B, system C. The whole approach changes to like, okay, teams or squads managing capabilities. Like I have a capability team for KYC. I have a capability team for risk, for part to production. Now these capability teams are serving n number of products. So they have their own internal customers in a way. And this is like, again, the problem of the central team operating, right? So when you have a central team, you get choked at the central one point and everybody is stuck if one team is not doing well. Now, the principles that we talked about, if we start applying, if somebody wants to use a payment service or a payment capability, it should be available as a self-service so that the team who wants to use, they are not dependent on the capability team for using. If they want to upgrade it or if they want to have the capability enhanced, then they are dependent on that. So we need to move to a quite a different way of working, and your organization design is going to change heavily. So this leads to a change management. So I would say it's a large scale change management, and you need a proper change management program also, along with your new org design, new ways of working. All of that needs to be defined very well. And this is one area where I've seen that industry struggles with the digital transformations. So
Mindset changes, essentially. Yes. Sunit, the bedrock of a lot of IT initiatives or successful digital leaders is that they measure success quite apprehensively, and they take notes of details. As GT said, the God is in details. What are the metrics that you prefer for success of these digital platforms?
I would go with, for every platform, we need to think about different metrics. Like for engineering platform, I would say, what is my delivery metrics? Like these metrics are very well defined in the industry, which is 4 key metrics, DORA 4 key metrics. So leverage that to see the engineering platform, how the engineering platform is doing. For the business capability platform, we can say how quick I can launch new products and variants, because that's the premise of the whole Lego blocks and all that, right? So now, if I am able to launch new product within months or within weeks, I would say, then is what my objective achieved. So measure baseline, what is the time to launch today a new product or a variant, and what is the time after. So that could be related to the business capability platform, or how quick we are integrating with the third party for partner integration, right? And today's ecosystem works on a lot of partner integrations as well. So that way, for each platform, we need to start defining our measure of success. And based on that, we can proceed that, we define it early, baseline it, and start seeing those into our, when we are progressing further in the platform journey.
Understood. Now, another important question that I had in mind was every company, enterprise, small and medium scale, or even legacy enterprises, startups, they are placed differently on the digital maturity curve. How should one go about basis their positioning on the adoption of these platforms?
Quite different journeys will be there for every type of company. You mean how the startups will
yes, there are startups, there are legacy
into this, how the enterprises will go. Everyone will have a different journey. So startup can start fresh. They can look at product by product and go build the capability catalog, where the legacy enterprise will have their capabilities already within the organization.
True.
But they're sitting in the silos, as JT was saying, right? System A will have same capabilities duplicated and all that. So for them, looking at the landscape, doing the whole portfolio study of applications and all will be the starting point. So for them, both of these organizations will have a quite different starting point and journeys while building the digital platform. So the vision can remain the same, but their journey will look a lot different. One could be like bottom up, where you're starting, you have a clean slate, and you're starting in building step by step. Another one, there is a lot of a mud of ball or messy state that we are into, and we have to carve out different capabilities which already exist in the organization, and create this map where we say that, okay, this exists, but some exist, but not in a form of capability. So how to extract that capability and make it available as an organization capability, all of that. And we talk about archetype of capabilities also in that context. So yeah, quite a different journey for different organizations and based on where they are in their maturity overall.
Great. Sunit, there are a lot of security concerns and regulatory concerns that come up, right, when organizations deal with anything digital. How do you address the security concerns that the audience might have and the regulatory challenges that they might encounter?
Yeah, one of the biggest advantage of the platform is that the cross-cutting requirements like security concerns, compliance requirements, and the other requirements like observability and all that are taken care at the platform level. So we don't have to worry about launching a new product. Let's say if I am launching new product, I start from a template which has all, I start from an application template which has all the security practices baked into it. And I go through all the predefined path to production, which has again all the security compliance related checkpoints baked in. Going into production, I have all the cross-cutting requirements like auditing, observability, DR or the highly availability, all of that taken care by the engineering platform type of approach. So in that regards, we build this common cross-functional capabilities as a building block for the applications that we are building. And with that, the whole compliance and regulatory security requirements are taken care very nicely and not everybody has to worry about. So I, as a product, if I'm launching a new product of, let's say, insurance, right now I am into just travel insurance business and I want to move towards health insurance, then I can start launching a product of health insurance by crafting the journey more, and all the cross-cutting requirement of starting the development till going to production and post-production are also taken care by the platform. So like data related requirements or data protection, privacy, all of that are baked into the platform capabilities.
Understood. So it's more of a security by design kind of concept.
Yes, yes, true.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I would like to pose a last question before I let you go. And Sunit and GT, both of you can answer this. What advice would you leave leaders with who are already embracing or already on a journey to implementing these large-scale platforms in their organization?
JT, you want to go first?
Thanks. Sorry. I don't know if I have advice, but one thing I would say is it always helps to have a fair assessment done in terms of where I am currently, right? That actually plays a very important role. I should really know, what my current state is and have a truthful, honest opinion about, where the current lies, and also have a very good understanding of what exactly I'm trying to reach and for the right reasons, right? What that end state is, right? And knowing that this is going to be a bit of a tough journey and a longish kind of a journey. For me, it's important to know where am I currently, where am I trying to go, and then figure out a well, thought out plan. But I'm not trying to advocate any kind of a big bang approach or trying to do all of that. There's another principle, Sunit referred to it. We call it a thin slice approach, right? Always take a thin slice approach in smaller sections Don't wait for 1 year to go launch a new product. That's not what we're actually trying to advocate. Follow those principles and figure out how you're actually going to get to your target from where you actually are. So that's probably what I would say.
Appreciate it, GT. Thank you. Sunit?
Yeah, I would say careful change management. This is going to be a quite different journey than what we used to have in the past. The way
Mm,
of thinking, the way of approaching, and even the org design is going to change. The way of working is going to change. How you communicate within the teams, within the organization is going to change, right? Dependencies are going to be different. Nobody likes dependency. But now
mm,
with this structure, you are dependent on each other. But how you make that dependency self-service? I give this example to many people, right? That Amazon AWS started providing infrastructure on demand, right? And
mm,
they are providing this as a self-service,
mm.
which makes them scale heavily. And we have to take a lot of inspiration from them. And that's why we call them as a cloud platform. So we hardly talk to customer service of AWS because most of the things are available as a self-service capability. Same way we have to think when we are building our capabilities, we build it like a self-service capabilities for the consumer within the organization.
Mm.
So if we do with that approach, then so this is like again a total mind shift change.
True. True.
And we try to avoid dependency. Say, I will create my own zone. I don't want to be dependent on others. So I'll build everything myself. Other person will build everything themselves. So this is going to be a quite different structure. So it's going to be a change. So I would say very careful change management needs to be applied along with your platform journey.
Understood. Thank you, Sunit. And I would like to specially extend my gratitude to Sunit and GT for answering all the audience questions that came up. And we've received some lovely feedback on how great the session was. So the interest is definitely there. And I would urge the participants also to connect with Sunit and GT. If you have any further questions or any resources are needed, the Thoughtworks team is always helpful with that. With this, we come to the end of the discussion. Thank you to speakers GT and Sunit for sharing their insights. Thank you, audience, for your time and the ETCIO team for facilitating it. See you soon. Till then, goodbye and have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Everyone
Bye.
for
Have a good
joining.
day. Thank you. Bye.